good evening, and welcome. Tonight we'll be going over the geography and history of Turkey. Look at this big map of Turkey that I have. Isn't it great? Before we get into it, though, I want to say that I started an Instagram for my channel. So it's ASMR Geographica. You can follow me on there. It's mostly going to be behind the scenes stuff, maybe some sneak previews, maybe some trivia questions. I'm not sure. It's really exciting. So you can follow me on there. Hope it's going to be lots of fun. But anyway, Turkey. I remember when I was in 7th grade, so I was 12, I want to say. And in my history class, we were doing European history, and we all were given a country to study. And I was giving Turkey, and I was so bummed because I wanted like France or Germany, Italy, England, like one of the interesting ones, I thought, in my opinion. So I did this whole project on Turkey, and I learned a lot about the country, obviously. And then I went to turn it in, and it wasn't in my backpack. And I couldn't find it anywhere. So I told my teacher I left it at home. And I went home, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I came to school the next day, like, crying. I was so sad. I'd worked so hard. So she gave me an extension for a week, and then I did, like, an even bigger, better report on Turkey, where I learned even more. And I got a good grade on it, thankfully. And I don't know what happened, but that original report, I found it, like, at the bottom of my closet, like, a month later. I have no idea how it got there, but anyway, I wound up learning a lot about Turkey when I was a teenager that I didn't know. And researching this country, I realized, like, wow, I'm not learning anything. It's because I just, like, retained that knowledge through, like, trauma, I guess, from having to do that report all over again. It was so stressful. But anyway, that's my personal relationship with Turkey. Let's get into the geography. Let me grab my pencil. I'll point out some interesting places for you. I'll go over a brief summation of Turkey, of its history, because it's very long and complicated, so I'll just sum it up, and then we'll flip through this book, and I'll show you some cool pictures, some neat places and people from Turkey. So Turkey can be divided up into 7 different regions, so let's go through each one and talk about its geography. Starting up here in this region that's known as Thrace, and then down here as well. This area is known as the Marmara region, and that's because of the very famous waterway that cuts right through it. So let me point out this little strait right here, very narrow, is called the Dardanelles. It goes into the Sea of Marmara right here, and then right through here, which you can't see because of the words here, is the Bosphorus that connects the Mediterranean Sea down here to the Black Sea up here. Very, very famous waterway. To this day, thousands of ships pass through this area every single day. Right smack in the middle is the city of Istanbul, the largest city in Turkey. It sits on both this part, Thrace, and this part of what this big hunk of Turkey is known as Anatolia. So you have Thrace up here and Anatolia here. Very interesting about Turkey is that Thrace up here is in Europe and Anatolia is in Asia. So Turkey sits in both continents, and so does the city of Istanbul. The part that's up here is in Europe, the part down here is in Asia. A very thriving city full of history, but that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the whole of Turkey. Then we have this region over here, which is known as the Aegean region, because it borders the Aegean Sea here in the Mediterranean. This area is, of course, has a gorgeous coastline and beaches, what have you, but the thing it's most famous for, I would say, are the ancient sites that the Greeks built long, long ago. Many ancient cities were built here, including Ephesus, which, if I slide this over carefully, you can see Barely a picture of the ruins right there. There's still lots of really amazing ruins in this area. It's also where the city of Troy was built from the Iliad and the Odyssey. Very cool area, in my opinion. Next, we have the Black Sea region, which of course borders the Black Sea up here. And as you can see from the map here, it's very green, and it is indeed very forested and very mountainous as well. And it's just a gorgeous little region. And then the Pontic Mountains, they're known, at least in English, border this area. You can see their Turkish names up there. One thing I found in my research doing this is that I'm absolutely horrible at pronouncing Turkish words. I thought I had trouble with my Greek series pronouncing Greek words. Not even close with the Turkish words. I don't know what it is about this corner of the earth, but I can't pronounce any of the languages in that area. So if you are Turkish or speak Turkish or know how to correctly pronounce some words that I'm going to say, please correct me in the comments, because I'd rather have the correct pronunciation attached to this video instead of me trying to stumble over the Turkish words. I'm so terrible at pronouncing Turkish, you have no idea. So next, moving right along, we have Central Anatolia, which is right around here. This area is known as the Anatolian Plateau because it's sandwiched right between two big mountain ranges. So it's doesn't get a lot of rain, so it's pretty dry and sparse. There's scrublands, there's still forests and all of that, but this is where Turkey's capital is located, right here, Ankara, capital city. Moving along to Eastern Anatolia, which is this region over here. This area is the most sparsely populated area of Turkey. There's lots and lots of high mountains. In fact, the highest mountain of Turkey is in this region right here, Mount Ararat, which, according to biblical theory, is where Noah's Ark landed on top of. It also has Turkey's largest lake right here, Lake Van. Big, beautiful lake. This region is also where the majority of the Kurdish people live. They're the largest minority group in Turkey. And let me move this over so you can see right here where it says Kurdistan, right? We'll talk about that in its history as well, because that's not a real official place, but it is, but it isn't. It's complicated. Down here we have Southeastern Anatolia. It also has lots of like grasslands, almost a savanna kind of terrain. And as you can see here, it borders Syria and Iran down here. Iran's up here. So it's kind of the start to, the more deserty area of this region, but not quite. So there are still lots of forests and greenery, but it's mainly just like shrubland, grassland. Then we move on to the Mediterranean region, which is down here. And just like the name implies, it is very Mediterranean. It's known as the Turquoise Coast. Very beautiful region as well. It's also home to the Taurus Mountains. You can see up here this big mountain range. And you can see the island of Cyprus down here. And right here you can see a border with X's through it, which means it's a disputed territory. This part right here is known as the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, recognized only by Turkey. So we'll talk about that in its history as well. So that is the basics of the geography of Turkey. Let's get into its history, which its ancient history is so fascinating. Like I've said in a lot of my videos, I love like ancient sites and stone circles and things like that. Turkey's home to the oldest religious structure ever built by man. It was built at around 10,000 BCE. I mean, Stonehenge wasn't even a dream of a thought back then. It is so ancient. It's known as Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe. Really fun to say, actually, whenever I get it right. And then much later on, sometime between 7500 BCE to 5700 BCE, the city of Çatalhöyük was built. One of the first cities ever built by people. And definitely the largest of like the very ancient cities. It had a huge population. Sometime around 2300 BCE is when the Hittite people came and started to invade the area and take over from the Hattian people that were living there. And they started the Hittite Empire, which reigned sometime from between the 18th to 13th centuries BCE. Later on, the Assyrians came up and invaded. Sometime, the early 1900s BCE, 1950 BCE. And they stayed in the area until about 612 BCE. There were lots of different invading cultural groups that came in during this time. I don't want to list all of them out. Those, to me, are just the most important. But also, this is when the Greeks started to build cities over here. They built Miletus, Smyrna, which is now Izmir. And then most importantly, they built the city of Byzantium, which is now Istanbul. And also in the list of people that came were the Armenians, which you can see Armenia over here. The Armenian people started to come into this region and stayed for a very, very long time. They came at about the 6th century BCE. But invading peoples aside, people moving in aside, the whole region was taken over by the Achaemenid Empire sometime in the 6th century BCE. The Achaemenid Empire was ruling over Persia at the time, and it was the largest, most powerful version of the Persian Empire, the one that went to war with Greece a lot. And in response to that, Alexander the Great came through this area and took it over completely in 334 BCE. He didn't live for that much long after he started his conquest of this region of the world. So after he died a few years later, this territory and all of his territories that he conquered were broken up into different kingdoms. And it was during this time from Alexander coming in to not long after that is what's called the Hellenization of the region, meaning like a Greek influence. Eventually, the Roman Empire absorbed the territory and added big Roman influence to the region. And in the year 324, the Roman Emperor Constantine moved the capital from Rome to Byzantium, mostly because the western region of the Roman Empire was being overthrown by a lot of tribal people. The list is so long. The whole region was like falling apart, being conquered, and this side really wasn't, so it became the Eastern Roman Empire. The city of Byzantium was later renamed Constantinople after him, like the city of Constantine. But this area was known as the Byzantine Empire because this was Byzantium. And what Constantine's also most famous for is bringing Christianity to the Roman Empire. This area became very Christian, lots of really famous churches built, including in here would be the Hagia Sophia, which you'll see pictures of in here. It's a very gorgeous building. But of course the empire couldn't last forever. It eventually was weakened by their neighbors, the Persians of the Sassanid Empire. After a lot of wars with them, I should say, the area became weakened and open to invasion. And the people who did invade, the people who did invade were the Seljuk Turks, who came in from the north up here and started to take over the area, which is how we get Turkey. A lot of like 90% of the population consider themselves Turks, as in ancestors of the Seljuk Turks. Their biggest contribution to the history, other than the name of the country, would be their religion, which was Islam, and the Islamization of Turkey, or at least Anatolia, began. Most famously, here in the city of Konya, a certain sect of Islam blossomed, I should say. They were known as the Mevlevi Order of Dervishes, which, if you know the term whirling dervish, that's where it comes from. You'll see pictures in here as well, but it's a belief that in order to get closer to God, you spin around and enter like a meditative trance, which is what a whirling dervish is. It's like almost like a monk, sort of, how they treat their religion. But that's where that all began. I think it's really interesting. And then, of course, in 1243, the Mongols came, like the Mongols do in like every country in this part of Asia. They swept in and took over, which severely weakened the Seljuk Turks' territory, which of course led to, someone else rising up and taking power. And that person was named Osman I. He ruled just a small corner of the kingdom of the Seljuk Turks' little empire here. And he started to take over more and more. His empire started to grow, and eventually his empire was known as the Ottoman Empire. And it definitely reigned supreme in the region when the Sultan at the time, Mehmed II, or Mehmed the Conqueror, invaded Constantinople in 1453 and made it part of the empire. He renamed the city to Istanbul, and the Ottoman Empire was born. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you've heard me talk about the Ottoman Empire a million times. Like in Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Ottoman Empire conquered that region of the Balkans up there. They went down south here into Syria, Iran, Iraq, and started taking over this area. They took over a lot of northern Africa. I've covered Tunisia already. They took Egypt. Just like a huge, strong empire. The height of the empire was led by Suleiman the Magnificent, which you can easily recognize him from this famous painting of him with this giant turban. It's in like every Turkey history book that I have, including this. You'll see it there. He was sultan from 1520 to 1566. He's most famous for reforming a lot of like laws in the empire. Definitely the most beloved, the longest reigning sultan as well of the Ottoman Empire. However, that empire began to weaken as well, starting around the 16th century and stretching into the 20th century. When they started to fight wars with Persia, they fought wars with Russia, all of course over encroaching territory as that empire was expanding. They created a new constitution in 1876 to try to patch things up, but that didn't really work, especially over in the Balkans, where uprisings against the Ottoman Empire began. Serbia declared independence. That whole region started to fall apart from their control. So did, down here, over here, all over the place. The Ottoman Empire eventually got the nickname the Sick Man of Europe, because anyone in Europe could see that this empire was slowly starting to crumble in upon itself. And it's during this era that the people in this region, the Ottoman Empire, started to rise up against the empire. They're known as the Young Turks, which is really how Turkey got its name. The Young Turks being named after the Seljuk Turks. But Turkey's really has its name because of that uprising that stretched into the 1920s. But very importantly, we have to address World War I. The Ottoman Empire, what is now Turkey, was the site of many famous battles, including the Battle of Gallipoli, which they wound up winning very famously. The Ottomans sided with the Central Powers, aka like Germany. Like whenever you say like one side versus the other, it's always Germany in these world wars, even though there were many other countries involved. And of course they very famously lost, and it was like the death knell on the empire. But I do have to mention, and I must preface, like I do whenever a really tragic thing happens in a country's history. This is a relaxation channel. I don't go into many grisly details, and that's not because I'm glossing over what happened or just brushing it off. I just don't want to stress you out about it, because a really horrific genocide occurred against the Armenians. Apparently it started because the government thought that the Armenians were working with the Russians to take over, so they just decided to wipe out the population. anywhere from up to 1.5 million Armenians were killed, including Kurds as well. Pretty much the minority peoples of the empire. Terribly, terribly tragic event. But like I said in my video when I did Syria not long ago, because there were Armenians there as well that were killed during their genocide. I'm going to go in more in depth about that when I cover Armenia up here, when we get to that country. So, that horrific event aside, it's absolutely tragic, and the government of Turkey still refuses to acknowledge it, but that's a whole other story. So like I said, the Ottoman Empire was on the losing side of World War I, so the powers that be on the other side, mainly Britain and France, got together to divide up the Ottoman territories among themselves. But there was already a movement going on, in the country, the Young Turks I was talking about, who wanted independence. So the Turkish War of Independence started in 1919. In 1920, the Treaty of Sèvres was drafted up to divide up the Ottoman Empire, which just escalated everything. The leader of the Turkish side was named Mustafa Kemal. And when the war ended in 1923, they won their independence, I should say. He became their president. I should also say that the Sultanate was abolished in 1922, which was the official end of the Ottoman Empire. So anyway, July 24th, 1923, the Treaty of Lausanne created the Republic of Turkey, and Turkey finally had their independence. Mustafa Kemal did a lot to change how things worked in this region. The biggest, most important thing is that he was big on secularism in government, which means like a total separation of church and state, to the point where women couldn't wear headscarves in schools or political buildings. They like any kind of religious anything in any government was completely abolished. The Hagia Sophia building, which was turned into a mosque when it became Istanbul, was turned into a museum. Just like extreme things like that to try to keep all religion out of anything political. One of the other big changes is that he ordered everyone in Turkey to get a last name, because that wasn't a thing they had culturally. So the last name he was given was Ataturk, which means father of the Turks. So he's more famously known as either Mustafa Ataturk or just Ataturk. He's extremely beloved in Turkey. Like, extremely beloved. Like, if you criticize him for even the tiniest thing, you're in jail. Like, that much beloved. He also changed the alphabet. So the Turkish-speaking people were using Arabic letters. He changed it to a Latin-based alphabet, which is still in use today. A little confusing, but apparently what I read was that he didn't like how Arabic was associated with the Quran and Islam, which seemed too religious, so he made a Latin-based alphabet. It is what it is. Much later on in World War II, Turkey stayed neutral, but they did side with the Allies in February 1945. They hopped in at the last minute. There were a few military coups in a few decades after, trying to reform the country, mainly the whole issue of the secularism. But very famously, down here in Cyprus, I told you I'd get to this, there was a coup on Cyprus and lots of violence. So the Turkish government said, we're going to help out, and they invaded in 1974, and they created this territory in 1983. 4. Let me check my notes. Hold on. Let me double check that. 83. I was right the first time. 1983 was when they created this. And like it says here on my map, this region is only recognized by Turkey. Not one other country in the world recognizes this as Turkey. literally every single country in the world besides Turkey recognizes this as Cyprus. So that's still an ongoing issue. Also still an ongoing issue, in 1984, the PKK was formed, and that was a Kurdish movement because part of the agreement when the Ottoman Empire was getting divided up was that the ethnic minorities would get their own country, which is how we got Armenia. But the Kurds were promised Kurdistan so they could have their own land. But when Turkey became an independent country, they just kind of brushed it off. The Kurds were subject to a lot of injustice and human rights abuses. I mean, their language was banned. Pretty much everything about their culture was banned to do in public. And, which, I mean, is also another form of genocide, technically. So the Kurds spoke out by forming what was basically a terrorist group. Most countries still recognize it as a terrorist group. Some actually don't. But they started using violence to get their name out and fight back. The Turkish government fought back with twice as much violence. I mean, in this whole Kurdish movement, definitely more Kurds have died than Turks in terrorist attacks. But it's an ongoing thing. The Kurds also, the PKK, I should say, started fighting against ISIL later on, especially after ISIL set off a bomb in Ankara in 2015, the deadliest terror attack in Turkish history. So that's still an ongoing issue. Also still an ongoing issue is Turkey's current president, Erdogan. I've been practicing that. I'm so bad at Turkish, you guys. Erdogan, he was prime minister and then later became president. He is really, on one hand, praised because he's trying to undo all the secularism. Women can wear headscarves in political office or at schools and things like that. Putting more casual religion into everyday political life is slowly inserting its way in. Last year, in 2020, he turned the Hagia Sophia from a museum back into a mosque, which is a choice. But the most famous change that he made was he wanted to turn a very tiny park, pretty much the last green space in Istanbul, into a shopping mall. And there were huge protests against it. And of course the government fought back against peaceful protesters. It's been an ongoing thing. There was an attempted coup in 2016 of his government, which just led to even more pushback against anyone who they even think might be against Erdogan. Many journalists have been jailed. News has been shut down many times. Erdogan keeps pushing for more and more political power. He's becoming slowly more authoritarian, like taking baby steps towards authoritarianism. And that's pretty much where we are today. It's an unknown history how much power he's going to wind up grabbing, if he's going to change the rules so that he can serve more terms as president. We've seen many times in my country series that when leaders start pushing the president for life thing, it's never good. So we'll see where that goes in the future. Turkey's definitely a country to keep an eye on, especially in the past 5-ish years or so. Very interesting movements happening, protest-wise, over here and over here. So that's where we are in the history of Turkey. And like I said, this is a very brief history. I could go way into more detail on what's been happening over there in the last few years, but I don't want this video to be 2 hours long, so I'm just going to leave it at that. That's my brief summation. So without further ado, let's flip through this book and I'll show you some pictures of Turkey. Let me put my pencil down. Turkey. Let's see what we have here. A beautiful bazaar. The Grand Bazaar in Istanbul. Look at these lights. How beautiful are they? Oh, those are gorgeous lamps. I love it. Here's a political map of Turkey. All of the many, many cities all throughout here. This region I didn't talk about in its geography, the Cappadocia, and that's because I can't describe it. It's so amazing. So I'm just going to show you pictures of what it looks like later on. There's where Turkey is in the world. Here's a very famous painting of Mehmet the Conqueror capturing Constantinople in 1453. We have some yummy looking cool spices and nuts and things. Look at these colors, it's so vibrant. Some men enjoying tea at a carpet shop. Apparently in Turkey, when someone walks into your shop, you offer them tea and talk to them before you start selling. Like this guy over here, pointing out some neat aspects of the carpets here. And some people enjoying a cafe. Look at this beaches. Here's what I'm talking about at this coastline. Absolutely gorgeous. Look at this water. Oh, so beautiful. I bet that feels so nice. It's really cold where I am right now. My fingers are frozen. It sounds so nice. Here we can see the Bosphorus Strait, this big bridge that connects Europe and Asia, and all the boats that cross through this area. This must be Lake Van, I assume, because this is talking about geologic features. Look at the big snow-capped mountains up there. So cool. Here we can see a physical map. Can see the big mountains, some of the rivers. The Tigris and Euphrates River begin in Turkey, flow down very famously through Syria and Iraq. Oh, here's the Taurus Mountains. Aren't they beautiful? Big and craggy. And this is on the Black Sea. I told you it's gorgeous. Look at this little town on this island. That's amazing. Here we see, this is the Blue Mosque in Istanbul, the largest mosque in the city, I believe, right? Well, probably now that the Hagia Sophia is a mosque again. That one's definitely the largest now. And here's an example of some Turkish, like ancient Turkish architecture, like Seljuk Turkish style architecture. Here's Cappadocia. So this is the fairy chimneys of Cappadocia. It's formed by volcanic rock. They're very soft. Many peoples built little homes inside of them. There's underground cities and tunnels all throughout this area of Turkey. It's so fascinating. It's so amazing. It looks unreal. It looks like it's on another planet. It's so cool. Here's Mount Ararat, all snowy on top. This here is talking about a dam that was built here in this area. The concern was that there's all of these ancient buildings there. I should have Googled and seen what happened to that. Maybe if I remember, I'll put a comment down at the bottom. Herding some sheepies. And here's some earthquake destruction because Turkey is prone to very large earthquakes. Here's a beautiful lynx in the snow. Gorgeous flowers. So this is the Turkish peony, only found in Turkey. Some of the wildflowers in the Cappadocia region. And here are some tulips. So believe it or not, tulips are from Turkey, and they were later brought over to Europe, most famously like the Netherlands, right? But tulips are from Turkey. Here's a big old stork eating a snaky. Little water bird. Parrotfish are so funny, aren't they? Here's an agama, which now, since I read that Three Little Dassies book, I just think agama man. I don't want to call them agamas anymore. It's agama man. Turtles, because this is a loggerhead turtle, very famously lay their eggs along the coastline. Very important to preserve their species. Here's a monk seal, I think it's the most endangered seal in the world. Some ancient stonework, I suppose. What does it say? This is in Hattusa, capital of the Hittite Empire. There we go. Here's a cool map. Ancient Turkey. So the brown is the Hittite Empire, all around here. The orange is the Achaemenid Empire, which is all of this. Empire of Alexander's in red, so all around there. And the Roman Empire is green, so all through here and all around there. some shipwrecks, because there's lots and lots of shipwrecks around the coastline there. Some ancient wonders of the world. Here's the Temple of Artemis. That's all that remains of it. It was also home to the Mausoleum of Halicarnassus, which is completely gone, but here's a drawing of what it looked like. And here's Emperor Constantine. We've got, let's see, this is the Basilica Cistern, which was a way of storing water underground. Emperor Justinian, one of the famous Roman emperors. Here's what the Hagia Sophia looks like on the inside. You can see how it was like an ancient Byzantine style church with the big arches and domes. And then they added the Arabic when it was a mosque. And this, of course, this book came out a few years ago, so it was still a museum then. So you can see people walking around looking at the building. Here he is. I told you it was a big turban. Suleiman the Magnificent. This gigantic turban. He's very recognizable whenever that picture pops up. I remember especially when I was in 7th grade being like, why is this turban so big? So here we see the Byzantine Empire is in purple. The orange was the Seljuk Sultanate. And we can see the Armenians moved in, the Syrians moved in, the Slavs moved in, and the Mongols, of course, just took over everything, as the Mongols did back then. That was their specialty. Another map of the Ottoman Empire. The empire under Osman. His son Orhan is a little larger. The main Ottoman Empire is in orange, and then under Suleiman is all the yellow. Here's the Young Turks in 1908. These are, oh, so I didn't mention in the history, after Turkey was formed, the Republic of Turkey, there were a lot of disputes with Greece, which still kind of exist today. But their solution at the time was to kick all the Greeks out of Turkey and all the Turks out of Greece. So these are the Greeks being removed. That was part of the Treaty of Lausanne. Yeah, really horrible for both countries. Here's Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the father of the Republic of Turkey. Let's see, this is Adnan Menderes, Turkish Prime Minister throughout the 1950s. And here are some people celebrating one of the military coups in 1960. It was in 1960 and 1980 were the two big military coups. Here are some soldiers during the 1960 coup. And this is actually, it says American troops providing aid to Kurdish refugees during the Persian Gulf War of 1991. Let's see. This is a protest for peace between the Kurds and Turks. And this over here is talking about the media censorship and how YouTube was banned. This is the Turkish Grand National Assembly right here. The outside of the building with Ataturk side. Here's Erdogan and the protest against that park. Or keeping the park, I should say. Beautiful Turkish flag. Supporters of Republican People's Party in 2011. Here's the flag. I always like to read this part. So it says, on June 5th, 1936, the bright red and white flag of Turkey was officially adopted. I'm going to mispronounce this. Known as the Yıldız or moon star, the flag shows a white crescent moon and five-pointed star against a red background. The crescent moon symbolizes Islam, although images of crescent moons were used in the Middle East even before the emergence of Islam. Some historical experts think the moon and stars arose from Greek mythology. The red of the Turkish flag represents the Ottoman Empire. Here's a lady voting. And Turkey's constitutional court. Big old face. This was Abdullah Gül, who was president when this book came out, and his wife. It's talking here about how controversial it was that, you know, she was wearing her headscarf as a Muslim woman, even though that like wasn't allowed for a minute. And then when it did become allowed, it was like a controversy. Because, you know, she's Muslim. That's part of their religion, but it's a secular government. You can go back and forth all day. A map of Ankara. And there's the city and one of the museums of its ancient history. The Museum of Anatolian Civilizations. Some dudes with some tomatoes harvesting. The currency, the lira, right? Yeah, Turkish lira. Maps of all the minerals that are mined there. This is the tunnel that goes under the Bosphorus, so that you don't have to take a boat or a car across. Women at work. Looks like they're sewing. And car manufacturers. This part, oh my gosh, this land formation is so fascinating. So it's this salty water that like keeps cascading down and makes all these cool little pools of water. It's the Pamukkale. One of those is right. It looks so beautiful. That's like a place I definitely want to go. It's so amazing. It's also a place in Turkey that doesn't look real. Big highway, which it's saying here, they built it raised so it doesn't interfere with too many of the trees or anything. Meet the Turks. Population map. You can see lots of people living here along the coast. Let's see, a Kurdish woman. We've got some people in school and some people in university. Examples of the language. So here's, the Topkapi Palace was where the sultans lived in the Ottoman Empire. Majestic palace, but this is some of the Arabic writing there in the castle, and an example of the Turkish alphabet that's used now ever since the 1920s. We got some very charming looking farmers and a little girl learning to write something on the chalkboard. This is the Selimiye Mosque in Edirne, which is located right up there. Really beautiful, beautiful mosque. Example of the Quran and a guy washing himself before prayers. Like always, whenever I cover a like majority Muslim country, these books always are like, because it's talking about like the 5 pillars here. It's always like, what is Islam? Every single time it goes over, it's either praying, and these people are having a nighttime Ramadan picnic. Here's an imam speaking out to all the men here because men and women pray separately. And this is a version of Shia Islam, apparently. Turkey is majority Sunni, like most Muslim majority countries are. Here are the whirling dervishes. So they wear these white robes while they spin around. So it makes this really cool effect. They hold out their hands, one to the heavens, one to the ground, to send that energy down to the ground. And this is the founder of the religion, Mevlana Selahaddin Irumi, which I'm sure I said wrong, but you can see the whirlers back there, the dervishes spinning. A really famous mosque in a small town in Eastern Anatolia. It's the Tivrigi Great Mosque, which was a hospital and a mosque. One of the churches in Cappadocia, so this is built underground in one of like the areas there. Really beautiful church, all that hand painted, hand carved everything underground. So this is Saint Nicholas, who we know today as Santa Claus. He's from Turkey, which I'm tempted to link. If you haven't seen Puppet History, one of the best history shows on YouTube, they have a whole episode about him. And how he saved the Pickle Boys. An old Orthodox monastery that when all the Greeks were removed from, well, at least in that part of Turkey, when the Greeks were removed, it was abandoned but it says here that they use it every once in a while for holidays. The Armenian Apostolic Church are like the Armenians in Turkey are the majority Christians in the country. There's some boys kicking around a little soccer football, but look at this. Look at these buildings. You can see behind the words. All these gorgeous colors. Isn't it beautiful? I love all the different colors. Reminds me of San Francisco. But much brighter. Keep to our pastels here in the city. Kayakers along the coast. That looks like so much fun. Camel wrestling, a popular sport. Apparently half the sport is getting the camels to wrestle each other because they're very docile animals. Come on, Paige. Another sport is wrestling covered in oil, so you're all slippery. The Bodrum Amphitheater that the Greeks built, or the Romans? The Romans built. My apologies. One of the old Roman theaters that's still in use today is a theater. This is the Topkapi Palace. Isn't it beautiful? All the tile work. So gorgeous. Let's see, this is an artist whose name I will mispronounce. Burhan Togunki. He painted murals. Let's see. Making a copper tray. Some famous ancient authors of Turkey. We have Homer, who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, and Aesop, who we know from Aesop's fables like the tortoise and the hare. Let's see, Orhan Pamuk, famous author. A little tram. Also reminds me of San Francisco. Let's see, this is in Southeastern Anatolia. Some of the ancient architecture you see there. And beehive houses in Turkey. So they look like on the inside. Very ancient form of housing, which is still around today. What housing pretty much looks like in Istanbul. This down here talks about how public restrooms aren't free. You have to like pay for toilet paper. A typical family out for the day. And during a funeral, carrying the coffin. Here's the hammam, which is the subject of one of my all-time favorite ASMR videos. This one I'm definitely linking in the description. Whisper Crystal, the very first ASMR artist I ever discovered way back in, I want to say 2013, has a video, because she was Turkish, about Turkish baths or hammams, and she describes in her wonderful ASMR voice the stage where you're relaxing on the hot stones, and then, you know, she pours the bubbles all over you. I've never stayed awake during that video. I only know what happens at the end because the one time I woke up right at the end. It knocks me out 100% of the time. It's so good. Pretty much how meals are served in Turkey, on like little plates, and you all share. Some bread that's served in the streets, which is called simit, which I'm probably also mispronouncing because I can't say anything in Turkish, along with this yogurt, which is it's this, which I haven't figured out how to pronounce, so let me know how to pronounce it. A yogurt dish that's really popular in Turkey. Some Turkish traditional dress. Oh, we're almost done. Some kids playing some games. Kind of looks like Ring Around the Rosie meets Monkey in the Middle. And just a typical day out in the city. West and East combined. That's Turkey. And that's the end of our video. So thank you so much for watching. These are turkeys in the world. There we go. More Cappadocia in the back here. Look at the little houses and the fairy chimneys. The little houses. See all the little windows there? That's so neat. That's a place I want to go someday too. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video relaxing and educational. And if you're still awake, be sure to subscribe because I have some cool turkey themed videos coming up really soon. And if you follow my Instagram, I'm going to show you a book that I checked out about Turkey that I'm not going to do a video on. But it's still a really cool book, so I'll show you on my Instagram. And you'll find out why next week why I scrapped that video. There's a lot of reasons, but there's one big reason you'll find out. So again, thank you so